requirements. I was just saying we have a quorum, and our first order of business for the regional transit partnership meeting on Thursday, August the 25th, is to recognize that we have Bea Vista currently, who is going to need to Zoom today. We can see you, Bea. Will you do a sound check for us? Just to make sure we can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you all.
And we're going to need to vote to approve these Zooming, I guess is the best way to say it.
She has to tell us why she needs to Zoom.
But that's right, but I want to vote first and let her, and then we'll get her to come in and tell us why. I mean, I guess we need to, does it matter the order?
I would have thought the reason would be given and then we would vote on whether.
It's usually you're voting to approve virtual participation for this purpose from this location.
That makes sense, so you're good. So Bea, will you please tell us the reason we're approving your Zooming and where you're located?
Yes, I am Zooming for medical reasons, exposed to COVID, someone who had it, but so far so good. And the other thing is I am in Keswick, Virginia.
Thank you very much. All right, I will entertain a motion. I will entertain a motion to allow Bea to Zoom.
So moved.
Second.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Bea, we hope you stay really well.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Mayor Snook, for agreeing to let me Zoom.
They have this little thing going on.
That's right.
So let's go around the room.
It all started with pickleball.
It did.
Yes.
Right. Let's go around the room and everybody can introduce themselves so we know who's at the table. Lucinda, let's just start with you.
I'm Lucinda Shannon. I'm the staff person for the Regional Transit Partnership.
Sandy Shackelford, the Planning and Transportation Director at the PDC.
Peter Thompson, I work at the Center of Belvedere, and I'm representing the Charlottesville Area Alliance.
Hey, good afternoon, it's Becca White. I'm from the University of Virginia Department of Parking and Transportation. We run University Transit Service.
Lloyd Snook, Mayor of City of Charlottesville.
Let's bounce back here.
I'm Gretchen Thomas. I'm the administrative assistant at TJPDC.
And you're more than welcome to introduce yourself, sir.
Jerry Riley, representing citizens all the way to West Down, one of your committees.
Great, thank you. Diane McKeel, Albemarle County.
Brian Pinkston, City Council of Charlottesville.
JAUNT.
Hal Morgan, I'm with Vienna County, I'm Vice President of JAUNT, and I'm their rural representative.
Great.
All right, John Lee with Charlottesville Transit. I'm the Assistant Director stepping in for Carla Williams.
Christine Jacobs, Executive Director of Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission.
All right, in fact, we have lots of people in the back. How about the folks in the back?
Sarah Pennington at Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission and the Ridership program.
Michael Barnes, planner for VDOT District.
Brian Davidson, Albemarle County Office of Management and Budget.
Brian Nichols, non-service planning district.
I'm Judy Lacey of JAUNT as well.
Wyatt Burchell, Piedmont Environmental Council.
Great, welcome everyone.
I'm driving quickly with MC right now.
Well, I just realized you were behind that open door. All right, let me just ask, the folks on Zoom, Bea, go right ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, Bea Lepisto, currently Supervisor, Albemarle County.
And I believe our presenter is there.
Yes, Chet Parsons, Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization.
Right, thank you. And you all on Zoom, can you hear us all right? You can hear everybody? Okay, good.
Just a reminder, anybody speaking in the room, if you can just articulate and kind of speak a little bit louder so it picks up on the microphones, that'd be helpful.
Especially with the mask on, it's really important. That's right.
And Supervisor McKeel, Wood Hudson has his hand up as well.
Where is Wood? Oh, I'm not seeing Wood.
Yeah, he's in
Jackson.
I'm sorry, Wood. I didn't mean to leave you out. I just didn't see you. There you go. Wood, go right ahead.
Wood Hudson, I'm representing DRPT on behalf of Neil Sherman today.
Great, well, I'm sorry, dear, I just didn't see your face, so I didn't catch it, my fault. All right, first action, it will be then to approve our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Will we approve the agenda?
Second?
Second, great, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? You're looking at me like I forgot something.
Well,
What did I say?
okay, so it's set up as a webinar so that you can see the panelists, but you can't see the attendees. And we do have a couple people who are attending as an audience. And you can't see them, but I can, if you would like me to read them off.
Sure, that's it.
Okay, Ben Chambers, Deputy CEO Trevor Henry, Holland Kay, Kate Ebinger, Peter Voorhees, Scott Baker, Sean Tubbs, and Stephen Johnson.
Wow, there are a lot of you back there. Welcome. All right, so I think, did we approve the agenda? We did.
Yes.
I think we voted.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did vote. So approval of the minute meetings, which you had in your packet from June the 23rd. And just a quick, did anybody have any edits or changes? Anything that was in error? All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion for the minutes of June the 23rd.
I move we approve the minutes from June 23rd.
Second by Becca. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And are there any abstentions? Anyone was absent? Okay. Next is matters from the public. And I think we do have some speakers from the public. I'm not sure about the webinar, but I know we have a person here in person. So you'll have 3 minutes and Lucinda is our timer. So if you'll just step up, sir, to the podium. And Lucinda will keep track of your time. And we're so glad you joined us today.
Thank you. I won't be very long. Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Diley. I've been a city resident for 43 years. I just moved to the county. I'm a 1997 retiree from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and I once served on the Community Mobility Committee here. And that was back around 2002. And I've been involved in transportation advocacy a lot, not much for a while. But back then, the Community Mobility Committee generated what they called a study of light rail transit in Charlottesville and environments. And Ryan Nichols, your staff member here, was involved at that time. And I just want that study to remind everybody of that study that's existed for 20 years regarding light rail transit, go to Standardsville, Crozet, or Zion Crossroads. So it's in your files, should be still on your server, and you have people here who know about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you for coming to speak to us. And Lucinda, the folks on the webinar.
If there's anybody on the webinar who would like to speak, please raise your hand or, raise your hand.
I'm still trying to get used to the following the raised hands.
We don't have anyone who's raising their hands.
All right, very good. The next item on our agenda is Central Virginia Transportation Authority. Chet Parsons is here. And I'll let, does someone want to introduce Chet, or shall we let him introduce himself?
I'm happy to introduce him.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah, Chet Parsons is the Director of Transportation over the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, the TPO over there, and he works with the CGTA, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. And as a part of our transit work that we've been doing with the vision plan and then moving into a governance study, we wanted to make sure to be hearing from peer organizations on the process that they went through, their lessons learned, any pitfalls that they experienced, just as a means of gathering information from folks who have been through this process. So we invited Chet to come speak to us because they recently started the Transportation Authority over in the Richmond area. And we thought we could learn from them, as well as possibly inviting other authorities from other regions in the state to us just as a learning experience. So Chet agreed to give up a good deal of his time very generously to come present to us, and then reserve some time for question and answer from the folks in the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chet, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Can you hear me okay? I hear some feedback.
We can hear you very clearly, which is great.
Okay, great. I'm gonna try and share my screen. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I am going to be talking in generalities about the Central Virginia Transportation Authority and some of the background and the work that went into establishing it. I understand in talking with Ms. Jacobs and Ms. Shannon about the focus in Charlottesville on transit, and there's a component of the CVTA that is focused solely on transit. So I'm sure you'll be interested in that. But I think some of the background in establishing the authority and kind of the work that's been done in other areas of the state might be useful as well. So I've got, I don't know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes of slides to talk through, but I'd be happy to make this as conversational as necessary. As people have questions, or if anyone wants to interrupt, please do so, and we can talk through the details as we go. So let me see if I can forward the slides. There we go. So the CVTA was organized in August of 2020. It is the newest transportation authority in the state. It's made up of 9 jurisdictions, including the city of Richmond. So we run the gamut from urban to suburban to rural, and there's a wide variety of census demographics and socioeconomic status and those kinds of things across all 9 of our jurisdictions. We also have ex officio membership from DRPT, from BDOT, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, our local transit provider, the Greater Richmond Transit Company. We have 2 members of the General Assembly that sit on the authority. Our Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority, which is our local tolling authority for our downtown expressway and part of the Poway Parkway. And then since 2000, we have added 2 new members, the Port of Virginia and Richmond International Airport. It's not on the slides here, but we are, I think I mentioned we're the newest, but we're the 3rd transportation authority set up for a region in the state. The first 2 were Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. And I'll get into some differences between us and them and talk about some of the variability and the capabilities of a transportation authority as we move forward. For us, we administer funds that are collected from specific taxes. They're gas tax and sales tax that is collected specifically for transportation purposes among our 9 jurisdictions. And that is all the details are established in the legislation that the General Assembly approved in 2020. Our revenues are dispersed according to 3 distinct categories of transportation purposes. And we have, in addition to the authority, which is made up of elected officials from our 9 jurisdictions, as well as the ex officio members, we also have 2 advisory committees advising us on finance and technical issues. So we, on an annual basis, develop revenue projections based on those taxes, the fuel tax and the sales tax. We develop those revenue projections with the state, with BDOT and with DRPT. And through those revenue projections, we're able to then work with our member jurisdictions to distribute funds according to 3 different pots of money. The first is 50% of all of the revenues that are collected on an annual basis go directly back to the member jurisdictions to be used on any transportation purpose that they have identified. 35% of the funds collected go into a pot that is controlled by the authority itself and are used for regionally significant projects. And think of smart scale level type of projects. And then 15% goes directly to our local transit provider, GRTC, to be used for regionally significant transit improvements. And that's a big deal, because that's something that does not exist in the other two authorities in the state. We are the first to have a direct allocation for transit. We have the authority itself has weighted voting based on the population, and also a voting tool. So it's a very scientific process for taking action on significant expenditures, multi-million-dollar expenditures for transportation in the region. Our focus in Richmond is to leverage local dollars for larger investment. We're all competing for smart scale funds across the state. Now we're all competing for bipartisan infrastructure law funds from the federal government. There are so many different programs right out there now where all of us are trying to put our best foot forward and do what we can for our regions. And having the ability to leverage local funds through this authority, we think will help us in the long run. And we're testing that out right now with this last round of smart scale applications. So we'll see if that guess holds true. The functions and powers.
Chad, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, and I apologize. Bee just texted me and said she's hearing some interference. So I'm just going to ask if everybody that's listening could mute, perhaps that might help. Sometimes that helps. Because I don't think we're really hearing it here. But anyway.
Thank you. I can hear it too. I just wasn't sure what was causing it.
We'll see if we can get everybody to mute. It could be the air conditioning unit here. That doesn't seem to be bothering us as much. Anyway, go ahead and proceed, Jen. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So the functions and powers of the authority, our primary function is to make sure that funds are allocated to transportation purposes as designated by the authority. And that includes regional prioritization. We had to come up with a framework for how to prioritize regional expenditures. GRTC has to, as part of their 15% funding, come up with an annual regional transit plan. They are focused solely on fixed route transit as part of their charter. And this is a new wrinkle for GRTC because they're tasked with doing transit planning for our entire region, which is 9 jurisdictions. Not all of those have service directly from GRTC. So right now they are working on the first iteration of that regional transit plan. So that's an exciting prospect, especially for our more rural jurisdictions who don't have fixed route service right now. We oversee distribution of funds back to the local jurisdictions. And then we have the capability to issue bonds as needed. We don't do that yet, but the function is there, and that can really leverage a lot more funding down the road when the authority is ready to take that next step. Just for reference, many of you probably know Hampton Roads is 100% regional projects, and they are the masters at bond issuance, and they've funded billions and billions of dollars worth of projects, especially through the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and a lot of their major corridor studies and implementation plans. So we see as staff, I'm the primary staff for the authority. We see that the authority really fits well in the overall prospect for regional planning. We start with the TPO, and the TPO is where the plans are developed, where the vision is set, where the community engagement happens, much like in Charlottesville, Albemarle. The CVTA then can step in once those plans are set, and rather than have them sitting on a shelf, we can actually use the funds that are designated through the authority to take those plants and move them into final design right away, construction, and get them on the street, possibly decades before a normal development process would happen. So we're really excited about the opportunity to leverage these additional dollars into real projects. Year to date, well, this is a little bit outdated, but as of June of this year, our local members had received over $85 million back that are directly back to their treasurers for use in local projects. GRTC had received almost $26 million, which is the 15% pot. And then our regional projects at this point for the year of 2022 had seen almost $60 million. So it's a sizable chunk of funds, and it's something that over time can really be translated into progress. Just some background on funds collected our first 2 years, FY21 and 22. The CVTA collected almost $114 million in regional funds. Almost all of those, and I'll get into this in more detail, were dedicated to one major project to show to make a splash and to show a commitment that the CVTA has to making regional change. And then we recently designated our first multi-year commitment for regional funds from this coming fiscal year to FY26 of $276 million. And that was split among 30 different projects across the region. So FY21 and 22, I mentioned one major project. This was a project called the Fall Line, and it's a companion multi-use trail to the Capitol Trail, which right now extends from downtown Richmond east to James City County to the Williamsburg area. The Fall Line is a north-south trail that goes from the town of Ashland and follows kind of the Route 1 corridor through downtown Richmond, through Henrico County, the city of Richmond, Chesterfield, all the way down to Petersburg and Virginia State University and the Appomattox River. So it'll have a connection in the middle to the Capitol Trail and really provide a major improvement to non-motorized travel across our region, north and south. This covers 5 of our 9 jurisdictions, and the authority voted in December of 2021 to commit $104 million out of the 116 that they had collected, 119 that they had collected for those 2 fiscal years to leverage additional dollars for the Fall Line. Immediately after that commitment was done, the CTB was committed to $42 million to match with that 104 and contribute to the furthering of the Fall Line. So the state recognized the commitment that we made through the authority and I'll say rewarded the region with the additional commitment of funds. We are currently under a development process for 2 design build projects with VDOT, with the Richmond District, to construct 2 segments of this trail, the northernmost and southernmost section. So those are going to hit the street probably in the next month, and then towards the end of the year for each of those design build projects. So we're really seeing progress, again, a lot sooner than we had hoped to see. So we're really excited about the project. Okay, here's the pretty pictures of the 2 design build projects. I don't really have much more to say there. I mentioned one of the things that really drives the CVTA and the commitment of funding is that it's not just a political process. We are required under the statute to develop a project selection framework, which makes it a more competitive process, and it requires all of our partners to submit applications for regional project funding. And we use data to evaluate and drive the prioritization process and rank the project applications according to merit. And we've incorporated a cost benefit analysis and a lot of other tools into the prioritization process, so that the authority is not making a decision just based on what they think, but also based on what the outcomes of the projects will deliver for the overall region. We set up a time frame that really follows a lot of the other funding cycles that the TPO oversees, where an application is developed. We identify quantitative measures to be able to compare project to project and make it apples to apples comparisons. We use planning level cost factors and best available information to collaboratively work on budgets for each of these projects. And then we score the projects using performance measures and impact data from things like our travel demand model. We developed environmental justice analysis tools and some other customized tools over the past few years to help in this process. And then we use the scores and the benefit cost analysis to rank the projects and provide as much information to our decision makers as we can, so that they aren't making decisions on $1 million projects in a vacuum. Some of the measures that we developed to help evaluate all these projects are split between different categories. Obviously, we don't want to compare highway projects to, say, transit projects, because the way to measure the effectiveness and the goals and the impacts of those types of projects are all different across the spectrum. So we separated it into 6 different categories, which you see on the top of the screen there: highway, bicycle, pedestrian, multimodal, transit, just planning studies, and then PE only projects. And the tools we developed all follow federal guidelines of safety, mobility, accessibility, and then we broke those down into more distinct categories. We have a process in place to evaluate it and select projects that can move forward. And I can come back to this if anyone wants more detail on it. And then we also look at our highway network for the highway-based projects and evaluate based on a more limited range of possible corridors that would be more regional in nature and not focused on neighborhood level streets that are lower speeds and lower volumes. We set up a project timeline for regional application cycles, and we're following that as best we can. And then this is just a couple slides, I think, on what we found through our first application process. We had 37 total project applications across 8 of our 9 jurisdictions. According to the guidelines that were developed by our technical committee, 31 of those applications were proven to be eligible based on all the criteria that were set up, and 6 had to be screened out. And those total project requests were almost $765 million. And if you remember, I said that the budget we had for that 4-year cycle was 276. So the need far outweighs the availability of funds once yet again. We prioritize projects. This is just a sample of the scores that we developed based on those criteria, like safety and mobility and access. And then the benefit cost and the resulting category rank are on the right side. So being able to put information like this in front of our decision makers so that they can have it at their fingertips was something that we think really helped in the discussion and the evaluation of projects as we put those out. We also looked at different ways to fund project development to make sure that we had as much impact as possible. And this included a couple scenarios where we did go out into the bond market. ended up not doing that at this level yet, but it is an option for the future. And the committee made a decision to move forward. We held public hearings and approved a set of regional projects. I believe it was in April of this year, 30 projects total, resulting in $276 million in funding across a couple different categories. And then the authority made a future commitment to fund the widening of I-64. There's a last section. If anybody's been to the beach this summer, you've driven through it between New Kent County and James City County that needs to be completed. And we were able to work with the authority to make a future commitment of funds to help support that project as it moves forward. Our next steps are obviously to look at bonding decisions, to revise our guidance framework as much as possible, to continue with distribution of funds to our member governments as well as GRTC, and to start planning for our next cycle of regional project applications. Before I get into questions, I think I wanted to highlight some of the transit considerations that we are thinking about are that our provider, GRTC, is looking at, they have not spent any of the funds that have resulted from the authority to this point, but they are gearing up for their next transit development plan, which will be focused on the larger region. And we're wrapping up a microtransit study right now that GRTC is leading, that looks at service to all 9 jurisdictions, kind of last mile service, and picking up opportunities to make connections between their fixed route buses and other providers in the region that might make better connections to the outlying areas. We are getting ready to start up 2 additional studies to evaluate next steps for bus rapid transit. We have a 7-mile corridor right now along Broad Street in downtown Richmond, bus rapid transit called the Pulse. And the ideas are to possibly extend that either east or west, and also to look at a north-south route, which would move from downtown up to essentially Parham Road, some of the major employers and development projects that are in that area, and essentially eventually up to Ashland. So those are the immediate kind of planning steps that the authority is involved with in terms of transit. But eventually, especially when you're talking about bus rapid transit, and it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars in development costs, the CBTA is going to be a major player in providing at least leveraging funds for major federal applications. And some of those may come out of the new infrastructure law. So I think we're in a good place. I think the state's in a good place for moving forward with organizations like this, with authorities. And it really does, we think, show some benefit when you're competing against the larger market, against other organizations across the country to develop ways to improve the stock and quality of services in each of our regions. With that, I might have talked for 20 minutes. I'd be happy to take any questions, go back and hit anything in more detail. I appreciate the time again, so thanks for having me. I'm not sure if anyone's talking. I can't hear. I'm sorry. There it is.
This is Ted from JAUNT. I'll make a couple of assumptions, and please correct me if they're not right. I assume the local tax, sales and gas tax that funded you was based on a local referendum of some kind in the region, as opposed to being legislatively imposed?
No, this was all through the GA. This was legislation that was developed and pushed through the GA in 2020, and that's what set everything forward. So there was no local referendum or ballot measure.
Okay, well, I don't know if that changes my next question. The authority being multimodal in nature, do you think the multimodal aspect to it enhanced its ability to attract that funding? Because we're looking at a singular mode here, I think, as transit. And in my experience, singular type things don't do as well when you're trying to get funding. So I was wondering if the multimodal nature of your authority was deliberate in order to attract a bigger funding pool.
Yes, I think absolutely. I think the multimodal nature of it helped in developing the overall package for consideration. But a lot of that was modeled after Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads and the success that they have achieved. So yeah, I think in addition, the size of the region and the ability to impose those measures through the gas and sales tax on 9 jurisdictions helped in the scope and scale of the revenues that we're seeing.
So that'd be a lesson learned for us. I mean, do we think if we were a singular mode type authority, our chances of securing funding like that would be less? Because if you're able to attract different constituencies, so I just wonder if you have a perspective on that or a thought about, as a go forward strategy, should we be looking at a multimodal authority instead of a single one, just for the purposes of enhancing our chances to secure local funding? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I think that the discussion about multimodal versus single mode seems like it would be focused on getting the votes. to be blunt, I mean, if the idea of a transit funding package is appealing to your GA representatives and a constituency of their peers, then the collection of gas tax revenues and sales tax revenues doesn't change depending on what mode you're funding. So I think that the ability to collect those gas taxes, for example, if it's for a defined region and could all go towards transit, then that would be a great thing, in my opinion. I think if you're trying to get local energy behind it, having the broader approach would probably get more supporters, because not everyone is going to be riding transit. People are going to say, what about safety improvements? And what about, I'd like to be able to ride my bike from my house to the shopping center. Those kinds of things wouldn't be impacted if you're only looking at one mode.
Well, it's the chicken in every pot strategy, right?
Yeah.
So, so it's, and I bet Christine and Diane know the answer to this, but I was thinking that if we have to look at a funding strategy that requires securing from the legislature, are we looking at hiring a lobbyist to poll the different legislator, or do we need a public poll where the legislators will feel comfortable about voting for something? From a political point of view, what does that kind of look like, do you think?
That's a good question, and I don't really know the answer to that. As in my position, we were brought in at the tail end of the language being developed before it went to the GA. So I don't know how it got started, but I do know that county administrators were involved, that our CTB member was involved, that our local representatives in the GA were involved, our delegates and senators. So I think having those people in the room from the beginning is a really important part of this. And I mean, honestly, I've had a great relationship so far with my peers in Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia, and they've provided lessons learned from their time and their positions, and that's been really helpful too.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm looking for hands in there as well. Go right ahead. Sure. Brian.
Yeah, so this is just thinking out loud to make sure I understand. So, Ms. Jacobs, if we were to do this, something similar here, would it be essentially like pooling the city's buses and only have a public works and then JAUNT, and then the same in the county, the public works and road, and then having reps from VDOT? If we were to do something exactly similar, and I guess the MPO would sort of like be the.
They don't need to be. So there's the interesting thing about the authority is it can be set up how we choose for it to be set up. And so there's a great deal of flexibility in its structure, which is part of the reason we want the governance study, is to begin to look at what are some different scenarios of funding and what are some different scenarios of allocation. It could be that the authority serves as an umbrella to just receive revenue, make decisions, and distribute the funding. It could be that in the long term, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, it could be that the long game is to begin to do some consolidation, some mergers, and change the way the agencies are operating within that authority. So there's a lot of variety in the way that it can be set up.
Okay. It's very helpful.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it seems to me a fundamental question needs to be answered somewhere along the line. Are we looking at a singular mode authority versus multimodal? Does the governance study tease that out, or do we need to? And then there's a litmus test as to which one would be more successful in creating a funding stream that works. So is that part of the governance study to figure that out?
The governance study is looking at transit authority models. And so the catalyst for this has always come from a place of transit and not multimodal. Whether we change course on that is a different question, but right now it's a transit governance study. The existing legislation is also a transit authority for this area.
So Madam Chairman, it seems to me somewhere we need to think about, from a political point of view, what's our best move, right? I mean, the transit is nice, but if that has not a lot of chance of being, we need to know whether that has a good chance of being funded or not, as opposed to another particular approach.
Oh, thank you. Chad, I think you've done a great job at playing RBA over there, sir. It's good to see you again. But I would also say that I believe part of what the study will help us do, and I think long-term it's going to be an iterative process. So if we are able to get in the smaller one mode, I think if we can show that the organization and structure works, there's more value in potentially adding on. Let's get the funding, allow us to build out our transit system, show how well that is working before we go back and get the bigger pieces. I think right now what's necessary to move transit along is this dedicated funding source. That's going to help solve a lot of ills for a lot of organizations that are in this room. Long-term, the general funds from the city, the county, and the county surrounding cannot support the level of transit that's necessary to make the thing to really be a strong advocate in this area. So I would hope that we would not shut off the dual model, but let's focus on getting the money first, making the model work, and then let's go back and ask for the authority, because the region will see that the model is working.
Well, the question to me is, I don't disagree with that necessarily, but the question to me is, and you guys know better, is it politically feasible to do what you want, or do you need to add some value add? I'll give you a quick example in Kansas City. We're looking at funding some massive transit improvements one of the core counties, and we did some polling. This is going to be a referendum, not a legislative mandate. And the best polling results came out of transit, elderly disabled services, and bike and trails. And there may be a similar outcome here. Now, if transit alone can carry it in a certain area, that's great, but I don't know if we do we know that? We have a good confidence.
And that's actually within the scope
Okay.
of the governance study,
Okay.
is to work with all 6 of the jurisdictions to
And
see
see.
if there is consensus politically
Okay.
around moving in this direction. I think it should identify that through the next
Okay, good.
process that we're going through.
And I see B's hands up. B?
Okay. Thank you. I'm just wondering, and thank you, Mr. Parsons, for that presentation, but I'm wondering regarding using the gas tax monies. Are we talking about raising the gas tax? Or are we talking about using gas tax monies that are already there and diverting them only to this transit, for transit opportunities? And that's question number 1. Number 2, I'm not quite sure where our transit tax monies are currently going.
What was that last part?
Yes.
Can you repeat that? Oh, did everybody hear the last part of her question?
Yes, where transit tax monies are currently going, we don't have, there is no.
Where are the gas tax dollars currently going?
Oh, to the state.
They're going to the state.
To the state.
To the state. Okay, so how did you get it from the state? Is that through our GA that you got it from the state to be used at the local level? Those monies?
Yes, that's correct. The gas tax is an additional tax that was levied as a result of the legislation through the General Assembly. I would caution everyone, as we've seen over the last few years, we don't know what's going to happen with gas prices and with people driving and changing development patterns and working from home, and all the things that happened because of COVID may continue. And so that's, I think right now we're still looking at positive trends in terms of gas tax revenues, but that could change. I think the imposition of the sales tax revenues is important here because we think that people will continue to spend money, but it's just a question of how. So being diversified in the types of contributors to the revenue for transportation is a good one. I think that we also know that over time, everyone is going to support transportation improvements. That's another point of the question about doing a multimodal approach, is because you want to get as broad a base as possible of residents that will say, yes, we don't mind that there's an additional tax because it's directly impacting me and my family as we carry about our lives and try and go from place to place.
I guess I was more concerned if we're actually going to be raising taxes, but getting through the GA at this point in time.
Well, if it's any indication, when the measure went through in 2020, I don't believe there was any opposition to the legislation being changed.
And I think what B's getting at is we have heard in this community from folks that we don't want you raising taxes and we're not going to give you the ability to raise taxes. I think that's what B's referencing. I will say though that we do have a strong pedestrian bicycle community in this area. And biking and pedestrian access really would be very popular. Just saying. Something to think about. So, and I don't see, maybe help me with, I don't see more hands up on the screen.
Oh, no, there's no more hands.
I want to make sure somebody, go ahead.
I'm curious about the timeline. You said that it was organized in August 2020. When had there been, I mean, had you had a study of the wisdom of the authority? When did the legislation go through? What have you been doing since August 2020? Walk me through that a little bit.
Sure, that's a great question. So I have not been in the Richmond region as a really long time, but my understanding is that John Watkins talked about regional authorities back in the 80s. And so I think there's been off and on conversations for years and years about establishing something. I think what kind of tipped the scales is that our elected officials were watching the funding going to Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads through Smart Scale and other things because of their ability to leverage local dollars into those applications, and just decided that it was time to bite the bullet and create this authority. So I think when the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel took nearly all of the Smart Scale funds across the state, that was probably the last straw. So I think it was just a matter of timing and having a CTB member that was on board 100% to get the authority established was really what took place. Since August of 2020, when our first meeting was held, we have been working nonstop to get everything stood up. As I mentioned in the slides, we've committed regional dollars. We've turned back local dollars. We've sent money to our transit company, and we're just now getting through the first round of kind of fund distribution across all of the different programs through the authority. So it's taken time, but in comparison to Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, we learned a lot of lessons, and we're actually doing it at a much more accelerated pace than the two of them did. It took 5 to 10 years, I believe, for Northern Virginia to spend the first dollar after it was established. So we're excited about where we're going. I'm kind of hoping we don't do it too fast, but I think at this point we're kind of making sure we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of what the legislation laid out and what the requirements are, so that we continue to follow the letter of the law and keep everybody moving forward together.
Certainly, I would agree with you, because this community lost Smart Scale funding based on that tunnel project. You could hear the sucking sound, right? Yes. Maybe it would be good, I don't see anybody else with a question right this minute. Christine, will you kind of update everybody on where we are with that governance study? That might be helpful when we're talking about it, to just sort of know.
Like when we're getting going?
Yeah,
Yep,
just
great.
an update on it would be great.
So obviously the CTB approved funding in June. We had already gone through the procurement process, so we had a consultant pretty much ready to go. What we're doing right now is finalizing scope. And we are, like, the consultant is actually one of the people listening in. We are ready to issue notice to proceed as soon as we've got that final scope. Once that happens, we can simultaneously be finishing the vision plan while kicking off the governance study. What we are doing right now is trying to make sure we are very mindful of the amount of time that it's going to take to work with each individual jurisdiction. You know, it's one thing to have some group meetings and to sit around the table and get consensus, but we want to work with, you know, the finance, the budgeting, the administrative team, the local elected officials. And so we're trying to make sure our scope gives us the flexibility to do the amount of work that we're going to need to do locally, and while simultaneously beginning to think about the work that we need to do at the state level, and working with members of the GA on that.
So when you say scope.
Yes, the scope of the study.
The scope, yeah, the study that help us with.
The timeline for the scope of the study, and Lucinda, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, was 18 months. And so we are hoping to have it completed by the end of calendar year 2023. And we're trying to do it fairly rapidly, this governance study, because we want to make sure if there is any other technical or assistance or funds that we need, that we can put in an application for the February 1 deadline through DRPT if it's needed. If we find we don't need additional funding and we're ready to do the next stage that doesn't require technical assistance, we could always expand the timeline if we need to.
So right now, this study, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand as well as other folks, that is just looking at transit only. If we wanted to
open it up to transit and say, bike path, just pull something out of the hat. At what point would we need to do that? Pretty quickly?
I would think so,
Now.
yes. Yes.
I mean, could an approach be, I don't know what you're thinking, but, seems to me if you talk to some good lobbyists and maybe do some sort of a voter poll to see if there's a combination of project, whether transit alone could carry it, or whether you gotta add bike ped in and kind of do, would you vote for X if it contained Y? If you had Y plus A plus B plus C, would you more likely vote it? Seems like you need that sometime. Maybe a lobbyist could help us to determine whether or not, in order to get the necessary votes in the GA, the package needs to look like this. If you don't have broadband in there, there's no way you're gonna get guys from Stanton. I'm making that up, but, so it seems to me there's a political calculus here, and there's probably enough.
Let me ask
So,
a question.
No.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the people who have to sign off on this, governance, once the study is done, and we have an authority, the GA has already given us in statute, there is a beast called Charlottesville, Albemarle, something. And then the sort of only further lowercase d democratic input that's required would be from the elected officials to fund the darn thing, is that right?
It would be to get the funding at the state level.
At the state.
And the
state
local.
At the state.
Yes, right now there is not within the legislation revenue associated with the establishment of the authority.
I guess I just foolishly thought the revenue was gonna come from the places that we normally get revenue for.
So Chet can answer that better than I can, but the General Assembly, the state collects the money on behalf of the region, the Richmond region, and they give the money to the CVTA in turn distributes the money. So the locals are not doing anything different than what they do right now. They're not collecting anything special. The state is the keeper of the funds.
And that's gas tax, Carl?
Gas tax.
That's their model.
Their model, gas tax
Their-
and sales
and
tax,
sales and
right?
use tax.
That's correct.
But other authorities have other tax revenue sources. That's part of the governance study, is to look at what are the possible revenue sources that we could utilize.
So we could diversify.
Yeah.
We could.
I'm always a big believer in diversification, because I hear a lot of rumblings right now out of Richmond about the gas tax. Right? I mean, Chet, are you all concerned about, or what you're hearing, or maybe that's not a fair question. Can
No,
you
I
all
don't,
hear
I don't
us
think
really
there's,
well?
I don't think there's concerns at this point.
Okay, all right. And can you all hear us real well, just to make sure? B, you can
Yes.
hear us, okay, everybody, okay.
I think, if I may, for 1 second, I think part of the advantage that this region already has is we already have legislation out there that basically said an authority in this region is a doable thing. So you're one step
Right.
up than everybody else who actually had to go through the same process. So that's a check mark in our box that we need to take advantage of. A lot of the government study will help us get to the necessary members at the GA to talk and let them know, hey, remember you gave us this authority a long time ago. You just never turned on the funding sources. We're coming back, we're saying that if timing is right for us to do it now, and this is a potential package of revenue sources that will allow us to do so. So I think we're, in my humble opinion, a couple of steps ahead of the other three that did this process, because they had to create the model and get the funding at the same time.
So, Chris.
And part of the scope of the governance study is to look at the existing legislation and see if there are any recommended changes that need to occur. So for example, right now, and somebody correct me, it's been a while since I've actually read the legislation, but I think it's set up as a Charlottesville Albemarle Authority with the ability to add our 4 rural jurisdictions. It could be that if all 6 jurisdictions, there was an appetite to be a part of the authority, it could be all 6, with the ability to add surrounding counties, Buckingham, Augusta, Orange, whatever those may be. So it's also looking at that legislation and seeing if when was it established? Oh, 8,
2008.
and seeing if there's change around that, what should look like based on how it's set up.
The greatest weakness is the funding piece.
Yes, that it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Well, nobody had it in 2008, so.
and yes, and we all know what happened at that time, which is why we never
Correct.
used it. We had the ability, but we never used it because the economy fell off the cliff. Christine, we have mentioned several times in this meeting, and I've heard mentioned at the Board of Supervisors level, that there are changes that need to happen to that, to our authority, right, from the General Assembly. And so the study will show, I just want to be clear, the study will show us what those changes need to be.
Yeah, through a
And then-
consensus process of working with all the
Okay,
stakeholders
all
to
right.
review what exists and
Right.
what we believe should exist and make recommendations.
Because I was thinking even, we have these legislative packets coming up right now, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing a window of doing anything that would advance us as we need to go through this process.
Your timing is set up to be in front of the General Assembly
For the
in
next,
January of 2024,
okay,
which is perfect time.
okay, all right. So
We work on all the
help us figure
legislative
out
programs in the
what
fall of
those-
23.
What those changes need to be in that, with that general, okay, all right. Any other questions? Yes, well, Peter, go ahead, whoever.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make one point, just as we're talking about what moves to include. One thing is that we're not going to be collecting revenue on the same scale that Richmond is going to be. So the other thing to be really mindful of is that we don't want to split this up so far that we can't make meaningful improvements with what we're allocating. And this did come because this region is saying we need more funding specifically for transit. So that's just something to also keep in mind. There's a political will, but there's also sort of the practicality of, wanting to make sure that whatever revenue we have can meaningfully impact the services that we provide. The other thing, Chet, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you know what the breakdown is between the revenue generated from the gas tax versus the sales tax? The gas tax is fairly small, isn't it, if I recall correctly?
Sandy, I knew you would give me a question that would stump me, but
I'm sorry.
I have it, but I don't have it handy. I can certainly find out and communicate that with staff.
Sure. Sorry, I didn't prep you ahead of time for that one.
Interesting.
So CAA doesn't have we're a non-voting member, so I also can't make a motion. But one of the things I keep hearing, and I hope that we don't lose, is if we have to now make sure the government study does more multimodal look. Seems like that this group would need to make that decision today or soon, or now, because from an age-friendly perspective, as the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County have committed to what the research shows, what the next healthy aging is. Transportation is multimodal; it's not just transit. No.
So let's speak to the timeline about that. If we didn't change it, right, and we go forward, and I don't know who would answer this question, and we realize that we need it to be both. I mean, what help me with, or help all of us with the downsides, or if it failed, that we could go back.
Sure.
I'm just trying to.
I don't have a good answer for you because I would want to go back to the RPT who funded this study based on the scope that was submitted in the application. And so if we are dramatically changing that scope to move away from transit and towards a multimodal, we would have to go back and say, what is the change in cost, and can we get the funding and local match to support it?
And I don't want people to think we're moving away from transit. We were just talking about adding.
Sure, I understand, and transit alone.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that? I do recall in some conversations we had that just because it's a transit authority doesn't preclude necessarily including other multimodal impact or multimodal improvements, specifically because they're needed to support transit. So I think there is some room to have some of this discussion still centered around transit, that it could support other, infrastructure.
And that's helpful, and it's really helpful, at least for me, to remember that the DRPT support was for the transit study, yeah.
Bike pad improvements are going to support transit.
Yes.
So it's a 1-2 combination.
So you can sort of get there another way, is what I'm,
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing, which is good. Okay. Any other questions? Comments? So I guess, Chet,
I
this
would
was,
love to add, Diantha, and I think everybody in here understands and knows this, but I want to make sure we have not predetermined the outcome of what this governance study is. We don't have, we're going to set up this type of authority. We're assuming it's going to be this type of revenue. We're assuming this is how we're going to allocate it. We're using this governance study for that exploration and doing that alongside all of the stakeholders and all of the jurisdictions to see where there's consensus and see if the direction that we're going is the right one. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're not saying we're going to have a transit authority and we're going to use gas taxes and sales taxes. That's the point of this next phase of our work.
right, and we don't even know the jurisdictions that are gonna, at the end of the day, want to participate.
Correct.
Which makes a huge difference.
And we've really been grateful, Chet, I'll say this to you, we've really been grateful for Chet and his team's support, just learning from them, how they went through this and some of the pitfalls. One of the things that Chet said to us early on, if you don't mind me sharing, Chet, is take your time and make sure it's done right the first time. Make sure the governance is set up the way you want it so that you're not making changes once it's already in place and you're having to think through all of these strategic questions while also, building the ship while you're, what does it say? Building the ship while you're flying it.
While you're sailing.
While you're sailing, whatever it is. And so I think what we're trying to do, at least from the PDC and the RTP, is take this one phase at a time to get us where we need to go and make sure everybody's on board as we move through those phases and not jump to a conclusion.
Right, that makes perfect sense. So when would the expectation by the folks here representing their different communities, when will we be getting something in Albemarle County, in the city, or in?
Very, very soon. We have to issue the notice to proceed.
She has a grin on her face. Okay.
Very, very soon.
Okay. All right. Chet, this was really great. I know we all, everybody in this room really appreciate this information. It's just wonderful to be able to talk to someone who's gone through the process in a community who's done it and successfully. I am really impressed at the group of people that you all have working together on all these projects.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but as you move forward with this, if there's anything we can do from Richmond to assist or provide a sounding board, I'm more than willing to step in as much as possible.
We'll put you on our.
Okay.
Oh, experience speaks there. All right. Any other last questions or comments about this? This is really pretty exciting.
And then as people are processing and thinking about this, if you have questions that come up after the fact, as some of us often do, please email them to us and we can communicate with Chet if there are answers he can get us.
Oh, and Chet, I know one thing. Would you mind sharing your presentation? You may have already done that, but I'll bet that it would be great for us to have that presentation if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
And Lucinda can send it out for us to all of us, because I'd like to take another look at it now that we've had questions.
And I would actually like to do a follow-up email that has not only the presentation, but has links to the existing legislation for this area, links to legislation for the CDTA, and a copy of CDTA's governance study that they completed. So just as a point of comparison for people to review.
So we can.
And thank you, Chet, for sending those as you were speaking.
Yeah. That's the nice thing about being on Zoom, see, you can do that. Thank you very much, we really appreciate it. You are more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. It will be really engaging, and I know you're, but our feelings won't be hurt if you decide to leave us. All right. Oh, Brian, did you have a
I was just waving goodbye.
Maybe he's going to stay. We're an engaged group. All right. So with that, anybody else have any comments? Okay, good. Moving on then. Next item: election of officers. And I guess I just need to frame this a little bit, because I think we didn't realize until kind of at the last minute that we needed to do this. And so normally we would have established
a committee. You know, because everybody's nodding their head. So we kind of have a choice here today, folks, and I don't think staff or any of us, once this just quickly appeared, I don't think anybody's really contacted anyone, to my knowledge. I mean, we're happy, I'm happy to have folks put some names on the table, we can do that, or we can establish a committee like we normally do and come back at the next meeting. That certainly is permissible according to what staff tells me. We wouldn't be breaking big laws. So I guess I'm just opening it up to see what y'all like to do.
Could you explain which officers were needed and for what?
The election of officers would be the chair and the vice chair, not just those two. Because this group we don't have a secretary or a.
Is your term going to be in?
Yeah, we normally, it's a 1 year, and normally we choose new leadership or leadership in, we're supposed to do it in July.
Right.
But see, we canceled our July meeting, and it kind of slipped up on all of us, right? And Lucinda called me and said, oh my, I have to add this, and I said, absolutely. So what we're saying now is that our process has been to appoint 2 people to a committee and to come back, and they will be coming back in September with a recommendation for a slate of 2 people. So, or we could have some folks volunteer. Lloyd is vice chair. We have been your team for the last year.
Can you guys nominate yourselves?
I'm sorry?
Can you nominate yourselves?
Oh, absolutely.
And we can take that as a signal that we would like to continue.
I think so you can nominate yourself.
Well, I am happy to continue, but I don't want anyone, and I'm assuming, Lloyd, I'm sure ask Lloyd. But what would you like to continue? Sure.
Well,
Or would you like to defer this
since
to the next
we asked me a
meeting?
year ago, and I can't resist these and treaties, I have to say yes.
Wait, what? Was that a
If you want to
motion?
take care of business today, you know, I mean, this is perfectly fine. Or we can have a nominating committee, who can meet, come back to us in September. Or were you saying you were going to be John vice chair? Sure, yeah.
My own personal.
It's been such an onerous job, however.
We had some fun.
Yeah, my own view is if y'all are going to continue in doing this, particularly this is a lot of effort. Probably work for you, I'm not sure about all this busy.
I do love transit. But
I mean, you certainly have my vote.
well,
I'm not clear on me. B wants to say something.
B.
I would like to make a motion to nominate Diantha McKeel as chair.
I'll second that.
It's very awkward, all those in favor. Any abstentions, any no's? All right, then, you want to take another vote here?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Mr. Lloyd Smith, Mayor of Charlottesville, to be vice chair.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor of Lloyd as vice chair? Aye. Any abstentions, any no's? Wow, that was, thank you very much. We appreciate that. It's very good. All right, very good. Now, the next thing is one of my favorite parts. Oh, no, we're not going to updates. We have a work plan to look at, and this is a vote.
So this is not your favorite part, but.
No. Favorite part is it's the updates. Yeah. So we do need to look at the work plan, and we have a copy of it in our packet. So, who wants to take this presentation on? Is that Lucinda? Okay, so go for it. Okay.
Yeah, so I think last year was the first year that we started doing a work program for the RTP. It's a pretty small budget but being staff person, I wanted to make sure that you all knew what I was working on, 3 months. So the activities would be program administration, staffing this meeting, keeping the roster up. And then supporting the transit studies, so that would be finishing up the vision plan, helping with the governance study, And then identifying support for other opportunities for transit and applying for those if they come along. For example, we wrote the governance study proposal last year as part of the RTP. And then the third activity would be information sharing. So that's like going to meetings and sharing information about transit in the area, the activities of the RTP. So for example, I went to the Regional Housing Partnership and talked with them about the transit vision plan. And that led to some really good synergies with them. So continuing to go to other meetings and talk about the activities of the RTP.
And then the other part of that information sharing is getting guest speakers and bringing peer agencies and making sure that we're getting information and not just sharing it.
Well, and I do know that you all go to a lot of public meetings and a lot of meetings at night, and we really appreciate all the work. So at the end of the day, we need to approve this document. So I guess I'm asking if anyone has any questions about it, any concerns?
I just have a question. I assume that we're within the budget of what has been allocated, and with that nod, I would make a motion that we accept the work plan as submitted in our packet.
We have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so you have your work program. And now we can get to our report. All right, provider updates. And Becca, you have to leave.
Yeah, that's
so
what I
would
was
you
gonna
go
ask,
first?
and if he would be gracious enough to let me know.
She has to slip out of the way.
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. So our updates from BTS is that, as everybody knows, we run the same service every day for our workers grounds, but we do reduce services during academic recess. And in case you haven't noticed, academic recess for everyone is over. We went back to full service, what we call our full service, on Tuesday this week. So just a few reminders of what that means. That means we return to a 7-day-a-week schedule. We return to running fixed route service until 2 o'clock in the morning. And although we're still down about 15% of our driving staff, we were able to reduce headways and therefore improve service on 2 of our major academic routes. We've been running 20-minute service based on our staffing problems. And we were able to reduce the headways there from 20 to 15. And we're hoping that we can reduce the headways back to pre-COVID headways of 10 minutes in the next 6 months, but it's a constant battle, as everybody knows. We are bringing back our combination of fixed route and on-demand running at the same time in the same service area. So that pilot went really well. If you might remember, we had a test name, we kind of had the name of the route was the night pilot, because we couldn't go, because it was a pilot and we didn't have a name for it. So we are, if you have any names you would like to submit, we're having a little, we're having a contest on naming that. Night pilot might be the winning, but it was meant pilot as in steering, it was meant pilot as in testing. So maybe night pilot would still work in a different meaning. But other than that, really, last time we talked about some of the construction impacts, which have been very significant. They're going to continue to be really significant all through until January of 2023, probably. The Emmett Street corridor, certainly. Just a reminder, the football games will return to our community. First home game is September the 3rd. But the good news is every game this season is a Saturday, so we don't really have to face one of those Thursday games. I'd like to say, looking forward to our either second or third, I forget, meeting of the operators. UTS is going to host. JAUNT has been hosting us, and we're getting together in about 2 weeks. So I would look forward to seeing everybody there. Thank you for letting me go first. I appreciate it. I'm going to slip out the door in a very few minutes.
Sure, that's fine. And B just left too, so she needed to go.
Thank you, guys.
Sure, that's great. It's amazing football games coming out of that. That's quick. Wow. All right, Ted, you're next.
Well, two things. First, Ziggy's game
We have a new planner, Zadie Lacey. She's actually, I think you're from Charlottesville, right?
Yes, I am.
So it's not only she's a new planner, but she's Lacey area. So we're glad to have her. Also, John will be issuing an RFP in the next week. We're going to try to secure a business partner to help us get into microtransit. So they'll be coming out for sure.
So can you expand a little bit on that for us?
Well, we want to partner up with a firm that will help us expand our creative microtransit portfolio for us, but also allow us to use the same software platform to support our advanced reservation and ADA services. So, as well as work in rural areas. So we're trying to get that. So we're going to go out and ask for potential partners to work with us on that kind of stuff.
And I did want to mention, she's not here today, but Jody
Yes.
Saunders, who most people I think at the table know, is moving. She has a new job.
Virginia Beach.
She's going to Virginia Beach. So
We will miss her.
we will miss Jody. So, will you give her our best? I just remember she was moving in.
Well, if you go to the Star Dairy Market, they're over there right now.
Oh.
Celebrating.
You keep it enjoyable.
Yes.
All right, good enough. We will miss Jody in the community. Yeah. Yeah. UTS. We have UTS. We're good on that one. CAT and Charlottesville schools.
So, city council approved the ability to unionize, so CAT will be working with the city manager's office and the city attorney's office to look at potentially bringing on a labor union to represent CAT operators, mechanics, and staff. So that is a new wrinkle in the transit world.
Just when you thought things were getting easy.
It's not new to Virginia. There are others that already have it. It will be new to Charlottesville. I know our drivers have already been in contact with the local ATU union rep in Richmond. That's the same one that represents pretty much the majority of the transit agencies around the country. So we're looking forward to those productive conversations here soon. With that said, we're still running our Lifeline service. Our numbers are not good. We continue to lose people to ETS and JAUNT. They pay a little more than we do. They pay a lot more than we do right now. But we'll hopefully be able to adjust that in the next couple of months or so.
Don't do it on our account.
I like the way you think, Tim. No, we need to do it pretty quickly because our numbers are getting worse by the day. On the pupil side, we're down to 7 drivers. We need a minimum of 30.
I see the signs that say walking.
And on transit side, where we are at 39, we need 61.
So just,
64, sorry.
this is a good opportunity for me to just, I would like to ask a couple of questions, and if anybody else has, sorry, I jumped in so fast. The unionization piece. Does that make a difference in our authority and how our authority, if we're talking about authority, we can just move forward and that's not a part of that discussion. I'm just
So
asking.
I'm going to say it this way, the models that I have seen that are in operations in the Commonwealth right now do not have, they're not really, the union has no bearing on them. It actually is at the elected official level or the executive level at the city and the counties that really have the authority. Remember, they pay GRTC to do service. The union is a product of negotiating benefits with GRTC. Has nothing to do with the.
Okay, so we don't need to.
No.
So
You
my
don't do that.
second comment, and I hope I'm correct on this, because this is what I've always assumed, is that if we do determine to establish an authority, one of the advantages of an authority is that we would stop playing whack-a-mole, as you were just talking about, with wages and salaries.
So, okay. Let me
And
say
maybe I'm taking us down, maybe that's not absolutely true.
So, part of what the union wants to be able to do is negotiate for salaries and benefits for the collective unit. It's actually, in my opinion, easier. If they have all three units, it would be harder to negotiate. If that makes sense. The more people they have, the more power they need.
Okay.
So having separate units right now is actually a good thing for the region.
Interesting. Yeah.
So right to work stay. So they don't have any part of it.
We are, yes, we're right.
That's correct. They don't have to be. They don't have to be, but the majority want to be because they think it's an ability for them to negotiate better salary.
And I just was curious. Right.
Dawn, can you remind me, do you manage people's transportation in the county as well?
I do not have the county.
Who does
It's
that?
Charmaine White.
And Charmaine's not here today, but Albemarle County Public Schools has their own transportation department. And Charmaine, who is part of this group, runs the Albemarle County Public School.
Do you have a sense of how understaffed they are?
We are understaffed, but not at the point that Charmaine has.
Basically like 10% down. It's not, it's gotten better. They raised their salary levels, and it's gotten better. I think 10, I don't want to say the exact number, I think that's 10%.
Exactly.
We're-
That's not the percentage that Carmen has.
We're the worst in the region.
Darla, can you remind us of a timeline, like now that the council has cleared the way, what best case scenario when you might have be set up to have collective bargaining with the union?
So that is all going to be worked out hopefully in the next couple months.
Yeah, I mean, to be
May or may not.
clear, we have.
Yeah, first of all,
Because it just enables it.
We haven't officially voted.
the best expectation is that the earliest would be July of 2023.
Thank you.
Yeah, succinct. Very good. Excellent.
And probably wrong.
Any other comments or questions? And I didn't mean to take us down the squirrel, but I was interested in some of this, so.
My regards to Carl.
All right. So Woods, I know you're
He's got
there,
broad shoulders.
and you are giving us an update from DRPT this afternoon, Wood. Yeah.
Sure thing. So 2 updates from DRPT. First is to remind everybody that September is Discover Transit Month. Throughout the month, DRPT will be informing Virginians about transportation options and encouraging use of local transit services to commute, travel, and explore our communities. The promotional effort is to help increase ridership, which has been impacted due to COVID-19. This month will help raise awareness and offer incentives and highlight many of the benefits of public transportation in the Commonwealth. Though there are some ongoing promotional events that include a Tri-Transit pledge that will enter participants into a contest to win free Virginia Breeze tickets, Amtrak Northeast Regional tickets, and by recording trips on the Commute VA app, the potential to win a $100 gift card. More information about this initiative is available on the transitva.gov website. I also wanted to inform the group that we have a mid-cycle grant opportunity coming up. This is for the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. Applications for that program will be open starting September 1 and run through October 3rd. This call for applications is focused on projects aimed at mitigating regional congestion in the following regions: Blacksburg, Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, Hampton Roads, Lynchburg, Nova, Richmond, and Roanoke. Eligible projects will benefit commuting patterns by incentivizing the use of transit for key trips within the targeted regions. The development of or implementation of these projects should be on regionally significant transit routes and or prioritize transit in regional streetscapes through bus-only lanes or prioritize signaling, etc. More information is available on the trip portion of the DRPT website. And if there are specific questions, I can share an email address for the DRPT program manager who's heading up that program. That concludes my updates.
What is there normally a mid-cycle grant for this? Is that normal for you guys?
No, it is. It's just because of available funding that there is a mid-cycle grant for this particular program.
Any questions for that?
We have a trips grant, just so that all partners know. CAT has a trips grant that is funding us through June 30th of 2026.
26, you said. Okay, great. All right.
Thank you, DRP.
Thank you. If you might just share that email in the chat so that if staff needed it, or listener or somebody, you've got it, you're all.
Would if you could send it to me, I'll send it to the group.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I guess there's no chat, is there? I forget. Okay. All of the groups need differently, use different applications. And with that, we're at other business. Does anybody have anything they want to? Okay.
Just a question about the North microtransit. Is there, I know that early conversations that it could be active, it could be implemented by January, but now it's looking at summer of 23, is that right? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Any new business?
I have something I'd like to add.
Oh, sure. Come up and introduce yourself so that everybody knows. And we can hear
Sarah
you.
with Rideshare again, and then we also partner with the Central Shenandoah PDC for the Acton Express. It is their demonstration grant, but it is assisting commuters to cross the mountain over here for jobs, which also falls under the rideshare purview. So just wanted to remind everyone that September is the anniversary or birthday month for Acton, so they will have been operating 1 year. So in conjunction with doing programming with DRPT for Discover Transit, we will also be working to celebrate Acton Express. So part of that will be rolled into all of that celebration as well. So just kind of look for information. We'll be offering opportunities for fare cards to be won as prizes. I believe there's going to be some cupcake celebrations at some of the particular transit stops. But we are finalizing all of that next week with the folks at CSPDC. So I will be sure to pass that information on to this group.
Right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Well, if there's no other business, Lloyd and I appreciate your confidence. And I know you all hate to get out early, but I'm going to adjourn the meeting until September the 27th. Thank you, guys. I'm glad you had a place to that. Yeah, you look very tan.
It was good and I think it's our textbook training. Skills increase. She's like that.